And we are live. Welcome back, everybody, to a new live stream here at Cryptocito. And first things first, everybody make sure that the sound is all right, that everything works smooth. I think it should work. But yeah, I'm joined today. This is actually the second time that I have you on by Senor Brainjar from Composable. They're building a lot of cool things. And I think last time has been the first kind of like introduction, and also the first time that I heard that a Polkadot project is building a bridge to Cosmos and enabling IBC. So very excited to hear how that has been progressing over the past few months, and happy to have you back on. How is it going?
Yeah, going great. Yeah, just like you mentioned, I think our goal has really just started like, how can we drive more connections to the Polkadot ecosystem? And then eventually, like, the goal has expanded much, much more broadly with regards to IBC to try to bring IBC everywhere. So really focusing on this idea of IBC outside of the Cosmos ecosystem as a necessary primitive to bring upon mass adoption.
Love that. Yeah. And even though we're in a bear market right now, I see there's only 14, 15 people here. You guys are the hardcore crypto people that watch these educational videos. But make sure that we can reach more. So share this video right now on Twitter, Telegram, wherever you want, WhatsApp, with your friends, with family, because this is important stuff. And I think especially in a bear market, like, it's really important to stay up to date with everything. But yeah, so we'll be talking a lot about what Composable actually is, Centauri, which is super exciting, integrations with more ecosystems than just Polkadot, because there's a lot more coming. And yeah, a lot more things, maybe also airdrop alpha leaks. So we'll see how much I can squeeze out of you today. But yeah, I think before, we actually have an announcement to make, because from now on, Composable will be a channel sponsor of Cryptocito. So I'm really excited, and everybody is listening that's excited about what you guys are building. You can expect a lot more content here on YouTube and also on Twitter over the next few months. But yeah, that said, right now, obviously, the crypto market is not really hyped. A lot of people are leaving the industry. Everyone's scared. So my question is, how are you guys navigating through these times? Do you feel bullish on building? Do you feel that the hype is kind of like affecting you? How do you guys navigate through this, and how do you feel about the market sentiment right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think the reality is like we've really reached a point where like the solutions of the past no longer fit the future. Like a lot of us have just dealt with crypto by just like using FTX, using things like Celsius. And I think the reality is like OPSEC is a very big piece of crypto. And operating in a decentralized, non-custodial environment is a core principle of crypto that we did forget about. I think for a long time, crypto was viewed as this like sort of get rich quick situation. I think now this bear market has really recentered everybody to realize, okay, what are we actually building for? And we're building for trying to bring about societies that can operate in an alternative fashion, meaning like, can we actually build a financial system that is outside of the centralized world? And I think the destruction of these various organizations has done nothing but propel our mission. I think what's going to be really hard is people really don't see a end game. Like, how is this going to end, right? Like, will there just be another FTX that takes up a bunch of retail interest, or will people start to now gravitate to something new and exciting? And we're hoping that people will smarten up and choose the better option, which is this non-custodial, trustless environment we hope to cultivate.
Curious to hear, like, did your personal views about DeFi change since Terra collapse, Celsius, FTX, all these kind of things? Or how do you think this affects the whole narrative and like the future path for DeFi?
I mean, I think You know, I think DeFi was built with how do we provide alternative financial primitives for people, right? 2020, 2021, and even to some extent 2022 saw like a lot of money being made by early supporters of these things, right? And there's nothing wrong with that, right? In some ways, these people are sort of early pioneers. But this expectation that crazy yields and crazy APY can just continue forever because we're doing things in crypto, I think is just an expectation of like, you don't expect your bank to make you, 20% APY for life, right? Like you can expect the same thing from a DeFi protocol. Instead, what you should expect from a DeFi protocol is security and trustlessness and the ability to know that your funds are being like used properly within the protocol. And I think if nothing else, like we really all need to sort of recalibrate and realize that this expectation of sort of like moon boys needs to like subside a bit, and we all need to sort of focus on why are we actually here. So my personal view is DeFi is like the most bullish thing currently because there really is no other way, in my opinion, to exist as a person in this sort of inflation rampant environment. But obviously, like the opportunities have not been as attractive as they have been in the past few years.
I definitely agree. I think security, like one of the big learnings for people that might have just joined crypto in the last 6 to 8 months, like before everything collapsed, I think a lot of these people burned their hands and are now like actually thinking about security, also like cold storage, how to custody their own coins. That's like you say, that's the most important thing, right? Like I remember when I started in crypto, I also did all these mistakes. I think eventually probably everybody has to do it once to like really, really learn it the hard way. So yeah, definitely agree to that. And I think also DeFi is like here to stay. It's not going to vanish just because some centralized exchanges collapsed. But I think at the end of the day, also everybody still has an inner moon boy to some degree. So and I think that's also why DeFi will definitely have always strong demand. And unfortunately, some of these products will just have these crazy hooks and high yields and those kind of things and catch people. But yeah, I guess you guys are building much more than just DeFi products. You guys are building the entire infrastructure around it to also connect different ecosystems to each other. And as you guys are actually a parachain both on Kusama and Polkadot, I think you have slot number 8, if I'm not mistaken, 8 or 9? 8.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. 8.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're probably one of the earliest parachains in the .sama world, but you're undercover IBC maxis as far as I could tell. So that's a cool combination. And my first question would be, how would you describe having this Polkadot background, but also really liking IBC? How would you describe Composable in 3 words? Let's say, for example, you know how Bitcoin has this narrative that it's digital gold or the internet of money. Ethereum is the world computer. How would you describe Composable in that context?
Yeah, so I think Composable is essentially bringing about this future of any money, any chain, anywhere. So really having infrastructure where a user with X amount of assets on one chain can now do whatever they want with those assets on whatever chain. Doesn't even matter to them which chain, but we enter a world that's a lot more user centric. Like I want to take out a loan, I want to stake, I want to yield farm, I want to do this and that. Everything can just be facilitated by our infrastructure, and there's no need for the user to sit down and learn about 50 different protocols, but instead they're sort of doing everything from one seamless application. So Composable, any money, any chain, anywhere, it's all about under the hood, right? It's all about orchestration in a non-custodial environment. So moving funds from one chain to the next, this sort of composability similar to interchain account stake atom on one chain, print ST atom on another chain, etc. IBC everywhere so that these connections are done in a completely trustless manner. And then lastly is sort of the user experience perspective, right? We just put out example of like how our UX process goes, and it's really key for us to build things that make things stupidly simple for users. Like everyone knows how to write an email, so maybe writing an email should be the way that someone sort of manages their funds across 20 different chains.
It sounds like you are interoperability maxis here and really try to build like a truly interconnected blockchain economy, which I personally also think is the end game. I think that's also why we resonate so much on the visions here. But how do you think you can achieve this? I mean, the thing about in crypto is everything is so fast living, right? Like now IBC is gaining traction. Maybe next year there's another interoperability protocol that will compete with it, or there's a completely new project, right? For example, like Sui and Aptos, they also came kind of like out of nowhere over the past year and a half. So like in that fast moving crypto world, like what's your strategy, I guess, to ensure that you always pursue this vision, that you don't get distracted by these noises that come up all the time?
Yeah, I think it really ultimately just stems from the user, right? Like what do users want to avoid? It's two things: getting rugged, and the second thing, not having access to yield and decision fatigue, right? And I think the biggest thing is we have built a system that addresses both of these aspects from the programmability perspective, but also in this sort of bridging message passing perspective, which is like expanding, souping up IBC and having it expand to other ecosystems. That's really like our core belief is the future is a user sort of is using a wallet and they don't even really know it's a wallet. They're just using an interface very similar to like Chase or Bank of America or something, but instead they actually know that they're controlling their money in a variety of different places. And so long as we listen to the users and we know, okay, these are the places that we need to connect to continue to to serve users, and this is the protocol that we need to use, IBC, to maintain trustlessness across all different ecosystems, then I think with those two guiding principles, we'll be able to like adjust our roadmap accordingly.
What excites you about IBC? I mean, I think Polkadot also has, it doesn't have it yet, but I think Polkadot also wants to have such an interoperability standard like IBC. But IBC, as of my understanding right now, as of my knowledge, is currently the only one in production right now that connects sovereign blockchains. So what is the thing that excites you about IBC, and how do you see IBC playing out in the future, like in the long term?
Yeah, I mean, so the first principle about IBC that's the most important is trustlessness, right? And how low level of a protocol can you find that can be abstracted and sort of implemented in other ecosystems? This was like for us to decide which sort of transport protocol we want to work with to extend to other ecosystems. The highest priority was trustlessness, and after that, it was extendability. So XCM and IBC are both trustless, but from an extendability perspective, like XCM is just not really that extendable right now to other ecosystems, whereas IBC is. And I don't think we're going to find anything that is more trustless and decentralized than IBC. Maybe in the future, we have some like magic or whatever that results in verification of transactions on both sides. But ultimately, IBC is, the king and will be here in 20 years from now. Every other bridging protocol will not be here in 20 years from now.
I'm curious to hear, like, how is the Polkadot community think about IBC? I mean, I'm always trying to keep up with other ecosystems as much as possible, but just like, it's super hard given everything that's going on within Cosmos alone. So I'm not aware like what the community in Polkadot thinks about IBC, and are they kind of mad at you that you guys are bullish on IBC, or how do they see this?
Yeah, I mean, so definitely there's like aspects, like some technical experts that have shown us some hostility regarding like IBC within the Polkadot ecosystem. I think the biggest hostility will occur when we connect Polkadot and Kusama over IBC, which has like not really been done before using XCM. So like that's probably going to be the most controversial thing we do in 2023. But I think ultimately these guys don't really care, right? Because they think that liquidity is going to flow from Cosmos into their projects on Polkadot through us, when in reality, I think it's going to be the other way. But, you know, I'm not a betting man, so I'll just like leave that to the sort of prognosticators. But I do think that ultimately there will be some hostility towards us, but there's nothing they can do to stop it, right? Like this is just the inevitable, and it's all open source software. So yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. I mean, I also had interesting Twitter spaces a few days ago with the Mangata DEX, which is a DEX on Kusama, I think now, and they also want to launch on Polkadot. And they basically, I asked them also like how do they, because they also like Cosmos a lot, but it seems like Polkadot and like I made a tweet also about this. I'm like, you know, in Cosmos we have Osmosis as the biggest DEX. We have Kepler, which everybody loves. Like we have a couple of applications. We have Stargaze, that's pretty well known. These are not yet the Ethereum like deep liquidity, massive user killer applications, right? But like at least there's like I see some substantial traction there and a solid user base and community around it. How does that look like in Polkadot? From my view, we have Moonbeam and Akala, but I don't know, like liquidity wise, and you are active in both worlds. So how is the Polkadot ecosystem compared to the Cosmos one?
I mean, I think ultimately, like the reality is, I think everyone needs to be a lot more real in this ecosystem, just in crypto as a whole, right? Like everyone needs to judge themselves based on the success of our Ethereum counterparts. That's what I consider as a baseline. If you consider how much TVL has been flowing into new indexes on sort of EVM land, and you parallelize that to the TVL that was in Polkadot and Kusama, it's not even 0.1% of the total volume. And that's just like, everyone should say, yeah, that's a failure. But the reality is everyone's living in their own bubble in Dotsama, where they say, yeah, you know, things are gearing up, you know, XCM is coming soon. It's like, sir, like the reality is people just need to be a lot more real. Like I've really tried to make people realize and leave this like cultish mentality behind within Dotsama. And some people definitely agree with me. And I think we're seeing some changes in Parity and other places, like a bunch of stuff on the forum, people moving in the right direction. But ultimately, I think people just need to acknowledge where the ecosystem is at currently and plan their roadmaps accordingly. Like if you're a new DEX in Dotsama, you should not be targeting just KSM and DOT. You should be targeting other ecosystems. You should be working with bridge protocols like us to get more TVL. Like that's the reality. I do think that there is just this belief that TVL is going to magically show up in Dotsama, and that's just not going to happen.
I can already tell this is going to be a very spicy interview. But we also have some Kusama and Polkadot people in the chat. But I think like, yeah, in the end of the day, also like, this doesn't mean at the same time that Cosmos is perfect or Cosmos is going to be the clear winner, right? I think Cosmos has problems as well. For example, when I think about shared security, right, like the Cosmos Hub is only implementing it now, whereas relay chains and Polkadot Kusama already have it since over a year now, I guess. So yeah, I think both have pros and cons, but yeah, interesting to see how that will play out. So we talk about this any money, any chain, anywhere philosophy. Right now, I think the first step will be to connect Cosmos and Polkadot and Kusama. We also had a Twitter Spaces a few weeks ago with Ilya, the founder of Near. I think Near is also in the works. So talk about some of the ecosystems that you want to bridge, and maybe some of the timelines, like when is that realistically going to happen in production?
Yeah, I mean, I think basically like the we're hoping KSM dot within the month of January is our goal. Then from there, we have many different integrations with Cosmos chains to do. We'll probably have a prioritized list, starting with the biggest. Osmosis would be sort of our first initial target for integration for our sort of bridge to our chain. After that, we have a whole variety. We'll be releasing an announcement later this week that details all the partners in our sort of testnet efforts working on this. And I think from there, we're definitely focused on the Near stuff as well. The Near stuff is focused sort of in parallel, but there's more work that needs to be done on the Near front with the actual Near team to push this forward. So I think, you could expect Cosmos throughout February and March, like from one chain to the next, and then a deep focus on Near sometime in the middle there too. It really depends a lot on how we can push forth with the Near team. Another big piece is the CosmWasm VM on our chain. So we just did release that interface for people to be able to mess around with CosmWasm smart contracts using our VM that we built on our chain. So people will be able to deploy CosmWasm smart contracts on our chain and be able to liquidity provide on our DEX and trade CW20 tokens on our DEX as well. We're hoping to time that release the same time as the KSM dot bridge, and also have a cohort of protocols that we launch with. So hopefully projects who are deployed on JUNO and Osmosis and Terra Classic, Terra 2 can be interested in coming over and deploying on our chain as well.
Very nice, yeah. So we have Composable building basically two chains, or already having two chains, which are substrate build parachains. One is on Kusama called Picasso, and the other one on Polkadot. And you guys are implementing CosmWasm on there, which is the first time. I remember we had this interview at your Unchained conference in Berlin with Ethan Frey, the godfather of CosmWasm. And he was so excited. Like, he was like smiling all day because he's like, that's the first time CosmWasm is going outside of Cosmos. So you are a substrate chain implementing CosmWasm and also becoming IBC compatible, which will enable full compatibility between the substrate world and the Cosmos world. I think that's really, really cool. But I think for a lot of people, it's a bit hard to like understand all these different elements. And you sent me a little graphics, which I'm trying to share right now. And then you can walk us through basically how all these pieces fit together. So
Sure.
Let's see if I can share my screen. Does it work? Do you see my screen?
I don't know.
Okay. Let me probably do it like this. Can you see it now?
I can't see anything.
No?
Mm-mm.
Maybe chat can let us know if you guys see anything. That's weird. Okay, it doesn't work. But anyways, maybe, okay, so there's, I'll just basically explain a little bit, and then you can walk us through how the architecture works of Pablo, Kusama, Polkadot, Picasso. So basically you have XCVM, which is this interoperability standard that you guys are developing. You have Centauri, which is an expansion of IBC. Then you have Picasso, which is the parachain on Kusama, and you have Composable, which is a chain on Polkadot, right? So can you explain how that all fits together?
Yeah.
And also it's like Pablo as a DEX, where this is going to launch and how this all plays out.
Yeah, so first of all, like we should put the Polkadot parachain aside for a second, because everything comes, the way it works in Polkadot is everything deploys on Kusama first, and then after sufficient testing and being in production for a long time, it moves up to Polkadot. So because we're in like early launch phases, everything is happening on Picasso. So that's the first thing. So first you have Picasso. What Picasso is made up of is a series of runtime modules, just like in Cosmos SDK, you have modules, same thing in Polkadot. One of those is called Pablo, which is XY equals K DEX, stable swap. We also are working on UniV3. So all the nice features of a DEX you would expect, you know, liquidity providing, staking LP tokens, emissions, those are all sort of going to be packaged into Pablo. And Pablo is going to be split up across 2 releases. The first one is in mid-December, where we just get the DEX out with some initial pools. And then early January, things go permissionless. People can start staking for emissions. And there will also be just various different LP opportunities as well. What powers the Picasso chain is Pika, the Pika token. The Pika token will officially TGE when the Pablo DEX comes out. Pika is used for, you know, paying for gas, securing the chain as well, using collators, also like paying for various fees, like to trade and things like that. So it's a very similar token model to, like, I would say, JUNO and also osmosis, and you can find more about that on our documentation. Pika will be able to be staked for X Pika, which gives you a share of revenue, fees, voting power, etc. So, and you can then stake those X Pikas with collators to start making this APY, like normal proof of stake, basically. Now, on top of all of this, that's where we have all the IBC stuff. So we have the KSM dot bridge, we have the bridges to different Cosmos chains, and we have NEAR. All of that is called Centauri, and this is like, we call it ecosystem agnostic IBC. So we've extended the IBC protocol itself to become ecosystem and Cosmos specifically agnostic. Now, if a user wants to trade something on Pablo, but has a Kepler wallet and starts on osmosis or something, say there's not enough liquidity for dot atom on osmosis and they need to do that on Pablo, this is where XCVM comes in. So a user can just connect their Kepler, specify that they want to make a trade of dot atom on Pablo, sign that transaction, and what happens is a series of IBC messages occur. So first you bridge, then you swap on Pablo, then you bridge back, and all that gets done from signing a single payload. So XCVM is kind of this like messaging layer on top of IBC that allows for this type of like high level orchestration. Now this then unlocks a lot of really cool stuff. So, you know, think of all the things that people were excited about with the interchain accounts. Now this can be written as an actual contract, and you create an entire application around an interchain accounts like system. So just as an example, right, like let's just say we want to open up options positions on SAY and DYDX. Normally, you'd have to go to each chain and make 2 different accounts and maintain your collateral on both chains. But what if you could have one account, right? That's where XCVM comes in. You deposit your funds into one contract, and then this can get propagated to different chains. And if for some reason you're getting liquidated, this then happens in a single location, not multiple different locations. So I think it's not really clear what interesting cross-chain use cases people will build with XCVM. We're going to be putting out a bunch of examples, like cross-chain liquid staking, like this Lido proposal we put out with Neutron. But it's safe to assume that we'll be able to do XCVM activities on all the Cosmos chains we're interested in connecting to. So that's also really exciting, because the same way that an osmosis user can trade on Pablo, it's also the same vice versa. So if a Picasso user has just a Polkadot JS wallet and they want to trade on osmosis, they sign a transaction and the swap is done on osmosis, funds are bridged back. So yeah.
So basically, in the future, like any Cosmos chain could also implement XCVM.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. All they need to do is just deploy.
No, yeah, go ahead. Deploy what?
They just need to deploy a set of contracts. They're called interpreter contracts that basically just interpret the messages that are getting passed. And that's it, basically.
And you said Pablo will launch mid-December with the launch of Centauri. How is that going to work? What type of assets can you trade on Pablo? And I think Pablo will also have their own token, right?
Yeah. So to clarify, like, Pablo is going to launch with just 3 pools in mid-December: Pika KSM, KSM USDT, and Pika USDT. And then in January, there will be this KSM dot bridge. Then you start to see things like dot Pika, dot KSM, dot etc. Things definitely become really, really interesting when you start to see, Atom dot or Osmo Pika or Osmo KSM, these types of pairs. So in an effort to drive like community cross-pollination between both ecosystems, we are looking at launching the Pablo token. So there will be a token for the DEX, but it won't get released until sometime around when the actual bridge has gone live to Cosmos, because we obviously want there to be cross-pollination between the different ecosystems.
And then I guess the Pablo token is going to be also, well, first of all, probably an incentive token, but is it also used for governance, or what's the utility of Pablo?
So the utility of Pablo is a bunch, right? So you stake actually Pablo for 20% revenue on the entire DEX, so similar to X Sushi, basically. The other thing that Pablo is used for is like a bit of alpha, but we are interested, if Pablo has enough transaction volume, it will need to be its own parachain. And so Pablo could theoretically fuel a chain. So ends up looking very, very similar to Osmo, with like fee revenue sharing as well, which I think is exciting. And the other sort of core use case of Pablo is like, governance, gauges, like controlling emissions and stuff like that. We also have bonding. So people can bond LP tokens for Pablo at a discount as well. So that's like the whole protocol owns liquidity story. So I think like nice. All the stuff I've ever wanted to do with a DEX is like getting put into Pablo pretty much, and hopefully the token can accrue value as a result.
Yeah, makes sense. And by the way, also like I've been getting to know you guys now since over 6 months, and like you guys have one of the most committed, broadest, biggest teams in crypto, I think. I think you guys have over 80 people, right, working on at Composable, mostly developers. And when I also talk to like core Cosmos developers, they all speak very, very highly of you guys in terms of like the quality of code that you guys are writing, that you guys are shipping. I remember also in Berlin, I asked Ethan Frey, like how much did you guys consult them or the Confio team? And he said, like, they barely ask us anything. Like, they just did their homework and they just built something, and we love it. So I think that's really, really cool and speaks of itself. But yeah, I think XCVM is then the next step that will enable a lot more things. So what's the timeline for that? And maybe talk about some of the use cases this unlocks. I mean, more tangible use cases for end users.
Yeah, so basically, like XCVM, we can already release XCVM in early January, but until the Cosmos, like Centauri goes live to Cosmos, you can't really use it for much. But so when it is live, right, the first use cases are going to be, you know, deposit Atom on Neutron, print ST Atom on Near, or print ST Atom on Picasso. You want to make a swap on Osmosis, connect your wallet to Osmosis with Polkadot.js, and you can now perform a swap on Osmosis. If you want to perform a swap on Pablo, connect your Kepler, and you know, you just go to town on Pablo, basically. Other things we're like really excited to push is like, I really do like this idea of cross-chain margining. So having a single account of collateral and having multiple different places it can be used. I think that's a very big problem for market makers and for just degen, like pro users, I guess. So that's really where we're going to be exploring use cases with every team that we're working with. Yeah.
Well, I see chat is getting more active. Chat, if you guys have questions, just drop them now throughout this interview to any topic, because later I will get back to these. But yeah, I think that's very interesting. Like from what it sounds, is like this could be the first like serious competitor to Osmosis. How do you view that? Like, do you see Composable being a competitor? And I think that's nothing bad about it. I think actually competition for Osmosis is needed, very much needed, because we don't want to just depend on Osmosis for liquidity in Cosmos. So how do you view that? And also, do you view a way how things can coexist? Also in mind that Say is launching, DYDX is launching, right? You have very strong order book DEXs going live. So how do you view the DEX landscape evolving, and you know, what you like Pablo fitting into that?
Yeah, I mean, so like the reality is Osmosis's vision is very aligned with ours. So I think the primary focus for us is like make sure the bridge is used for every single Cosmos chain in the ecosystem, right? DYDX, Say, Osmosis, Neutron, everyone that's launching, we want to have this IBC connection with them. For us, Pablo is an option for users if they want to make direct trades without having to hop to different places, right? So if you want to swap Near for Atom, probably the best place to do that is Pablo, because otherwise you have to hop so many different times to get to Osmosis or to get to Say, for instance, for this to actually happen, right? So I think ultimately we'll be a part of the liquidity story for Cosmos, but you know, we see like Osmosis as being like a very Cosmos native DEX. And we think that because we're in the middle of all these different connections, that, you know, most likely we will be the DEX that has more other assets, Near, DOT, KSM, USDC from Near. So I think places like StableSwap, like I don't think, you know, we can compete on every pool, and I think we know that, right? But for instance, StableSwap is something that could be very cool for us, right? You could set up a 4-pool with USDC from Sama, USDC from Cosmos, USDC from Near, and then IST, right? That's something that like these types of like crazy looking pools are the types of pools we want to focus on, and be like the DEX known for having the crazy looking pools.
Could be the slogan of Pablo, the most interoperable DEX in crypto. I think that yeah, because yeah, it's not that easy, but and we've also seen a lot more DEXs in Cosmos that haven't gained that traction. I think a lot of it also comes with the UX and the UI. But I know that's I mean, I've met your designer and he's doing incredible work. Also, I think it needs to be very intuitive for users to like really have less to think about and more obvious ways to like navigate through the platform. I think that's also very important. But I guess that's also one of your big focuses, right? When you're launching Pablo.
Yeah, absolutely. I think like we spent so much time on this UX that like I think people will be very surprised when they use it. And we definitely like will tease it. We tease it a few times, but I think we'll tease it a lot more in the coming weeks as we get closer to launch.
Yeah, no, I think especially in the bear market, you know, like people are still excited about product launches, and I think now it's also the time for people to really stay up to date with these cool, innovative things going live. Everybody is just following the FTX story and SBF and what he says next, but there's so much that's being built and worked on. So, but yeah, I also wanted to ask you. I mean, we talked about the about Picasso and Pika and Pablo. What about the main chain on Polkadot? What's the game plan for that?
Yeah, so the game plan is like everything that gets tested out for 3 months on Picasso will upgrade up to Polkadot. So different pieces of the infrastructure will move up to Polkadot. So probably Pablo will move up to the Polkadot chain for a bit, and then I could see Pablo become its own Polkadot and Kusama chain as we discussed. But then obviously like the bridging infrastructure would go up to the Polkadot chain, and same thing with XEVM. There is like some other thought around other scalability things that I don't want to leak at the moment, but the story of Pika and Layer is going to be very different than just copy paste Kusama and Polkadot like every other project.
I also want to like highlight here, and we can talk a little bit about this. Like, this is your internal strategy, right? There's no rule that says you need to be 3 months on Kusama before you go on Polkadot. And we've seen other projects. Like, that was also like my thoughts when I saw that AUSD from Akala was exploited on, I think it was on the Akala chain, right? Which is on Polkadot. So they didn't kind of like really stress test it on Kusama. And to me, like when I first read that, I'm like, okay, doesn't this kind of like invalidate the Canary network thesis? So I'm curious to hear what you think about this Canary network idea to have Kusama as like the public test net that's actually in production and actually on mainnet, but actually it's not. So how do you view this? And do you think there's in the future going to be a winner between Polkadot or Kusama, or do you think they will always just coexist?
I think that I put out a thread the other like couple weeks ago about how we should change the vision of Kusama to be more like cross-chain oriented. So people go and like my vision is that people build XCVM applications on our chain, and then these XCVM applications become their own parachains on Kusama. And then the idea is that Kusama becomes this like middle ground between Polkadot, Cosmos, Near, etc., as this really like expect chaos sort of vision. And then for me, like Polkadot is where Dot lives, right? Polkadot is where people can do things with their dots, but if they want to go do something more novel and edgy, they come to Kusama to mess with these different cross-chain applications. So, and I would agree with you, like people really have not given Kusama the attention that they should have. I think Kusama is like a great concept, right? It's just been executed poorly because every chain has just instantly moved to Polkadot because there's more TVL. But that's also why we have the Polkadot Kusama bridge, right? So now you can bridge your dot to Kusama. So like for me, I'm much more bullish on Kusama than I am Polkadot personally,
Really?
just because
Okay.
I think that Kusama has a lot more experimentation happening on it than Polkadot, and I think also like the degens are all Kusama people, right? Like you don't see any dot degens, right? People who are dot degens are really sort of dot whales. So I don't foresee people in dot looking at something that's like cross chain and saying, oh, let me like go start moving my assets to Cosmos. Like I think that rather what's going to happen is they're going to bridge to Kusama, and then they sort of turn into like a Kusama degen, and then they move to different places.
I had a similar conversation actually with Mangata also on Twitter a few days ago, and they said the same thing. They actually said we actually only want to stay on Kusama. So yeah, I think a lot of projects see it that way. Also, I'm gonna drop your Twitter handle in here because I know you're gonna push out more threads and stuff in the future. Also with all these things launching. So for cosmonauts that want to stay up to date, follow 0x Brainjar on Twitter. But yeah, so we talked about Pablo. What are some of the other applications that you either are building on or that you know teams are building to deploy on top of Picasso? Do we potentially also see some NFT stuff someday, or do you purely focus on DeFi?
Yeah, so actually the staking is all FNFTs, so like financial NFTs. So very similar to like UniV3, we see, these things are basically NFTs, which is really cool. The other thing is because we have COSM WASM, people can deploy all types of, NFTs that can get bridged over to Stargaze and stuff like that. So we're actually like, I would love to explore a much deeper collaboration with Stargaze to get some of the creators coming to our chain, and like maybe people buy, something that's really cool about Kusama is there is quite a big NFT marketplace there that people use called Singularity. People actually like really degen hard with NFTs on .sama. So I think it could be really interesting to just have like Stargaze come and deploy a protocol instance on our chain and start offering, bad kids NFTs, whatever. So I think that could be really cool.
Yeah, it definitely sounds cool. But yeah, a lot of exciting stuff that's coming. We're going to go through some questions in the chat in a second. But before that, I wanted to ask you also, since you are a cosmonaut as well, what were your thoughts around Atom 2.0? You've also been at Cosmoverse, which is where it was announced. And where do you see the future of the Cosmos Hub going? Somebody also asked, by the way, if Pablo could eventually become a consumer chain on the Cosmos Hub. So what do you think is happening there?
Yeah, I'm very bullish on, the interchain scheduler. I didn't really follow too much on the whole allocator conversation. Like, I don't have many like opinions about that. I just think that, if Atom stakers vote to direct Atom somewhere and then bring it back, not just waste the Atom like emissions or whatever, like that could be a nice idea. I actually posted this idea in the Polkadot forum because that's what I think the DOT treasury should do. But I thought the interchain scheduler was a fantastic idea. I think that's the real way that value accrues to sort of like layer 0 protocols like Atom, basically, that provide like security, and then you have consumer chains on top. So that's my opinion about Atom 2.0. I think regarding Pablo as a consumer chain, I actually spoke to Billy about this a while ago. Like, how can we make a parachain that has already shared security also get some security from the hub? I don't know what needs to happen from a technical perspective to make that happen, but it is something I'd love to see, right? Like, imagine you had shared security from the and shared security from the relay chain. That's incredibly bullish.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, I know at Cosmos, Sunny, Jake, and Ethan and some others worked on mesh security, but I think
Yeah,
it's purely for Cosmos chains. But imagine like beyond that, right? Like even Ethereum
that's
at
a
some
great
point,
point.
or like all these other
Hmm.
chains, like mesh security in all crypto. And like every chain secures any other chain if they want to, and
Mm.
vice versa. This sounds like the end game for shared security. But yeah, interesting to see how also interchain security on the Cosmos Hub will go to market, how it will be received. Obviously, shared security and Polkadot and Kusama launched with a bang, but also the market sentiment was totally different. But yeah, how do you see that happening? How do you think interchain security is going to be received when it launches next
I
month?
think like, I mean, look, right? Ultimately, I think it shared security is only important if you have volume, right? So like it's nice to know that a chain has security from the Cosmos Hub, but if it doesn't have like tremendous volume, then uh, is there a huge benefit to the ecosystem, right? I think that long term it's a nice future proofing mechanism, and something that's like very important for starting teams that don't want to go build up a massive, validator set and all that. So I think it's like a very valuable thing. Um, I think just time will tell like how much will this impact the sort of broader ecosystem as a whole. Like
Yeah, I think
that's why
used like yeah.
I was just gonna
Go
say
ahead.
that that's why Adam 2.0 proposed the scheduler and the allocator, right? Things that live on top of the shared security that actually do something. Um, so yeah.
Yeah, I think there's definitely going to be a revised version of Atom 2.0, and I think it will also be cut into pieces and then go back to governance with executionable or actionable proposals, because this has just been a signal proposal, right? I think just the scope of Atom 2.0 was too broad, which is why it was rejected. But
Yeah.
I think it will come back in actionable proposals. But yeah, I mean, I'm bullish on like the native issuance chain that Circle is building with
Yeah.
USDC coming natively to the hub. Neutron is building cool stuff. Liquid staking, Stride. I think there's a lot of like potentially high traffic consumer chains that would, as you say, would then add value in a very very organic way to the Cosmos Hub. But yeah, let's go to some questions, and then in the end, some alpha leaks, airdrop alpha, this and that. First question from Given: why is it so hard for IBC to integrate to Ethereum rather than Near?
Yeah.
Why is
So
that the case?
Ethereum has a different signature scheme. So that's basically the answer. So you can do IBC to Ethereum already, right? Like I want to be very clear, like it is very possible to do IBC to ETH. Like we're already doing this, but that's kind of what we call the naive implementation because it becomes too expensive that it's not worth the bridge, like to actually bridge. That's why ZK stuff is necessary. For Near, on the other hand, you don't have that problem. So it's like very straightforward and easy. Not
Do you
easy,
think
but
event?
yeah.
Yeah. Do you think eventually like Ethereum is going to implement IBC?
Yeah. I mean, we're definitely working on this. So like I know other teams are doing the same thing too, but like we have a dedicated team dedicated to IBC on Ethereum. So like after Near, this is like our core focus. Like all the resources we put on to Cosmos and Near like will be sort of realigned into Ethereum. And so like I would expect us to do a lot more proposals and EIPs and other things like that come Q2.
Nice. That's cool. Jack is asking, what is different about Pablo compared to other dexes in Polkadot?
Well, first of all, most DEXs in Polkadot have terrible UXs, just being honest. Second of all, like no LP emissions, liquidity providing, staking of those LP tokens. None of this like sort of DeFi degen mentality. There's no use case for their token either, for the DEX tokens, really, like at all. There's no protocol owned liquidity. There's no stable swap. There's no, it's not permissionless. So you literally can't list a new pool. That's, I mean, I think that's like terrible. Yeah, I'm not gonna go too much more, or else I'm gonna have to get cut off. So
the matrix is chasing you down. Citrus Mimosa saying, "Love this project." Seth is bullish. Elegant is saying, "Composable products are future-proof." There we go. There we go. You have a clan already. Fanboys out there and fangirls. There's also a good question from Dan. Will there be any Pika liquidity on Osmosis?
Yes. Yeah. So obviously you can imagine like we want Pika to be everywhere, right? Everywhere we connect, we want Pika to be in those places. And we definitely do want the same thing, right? Like Osmosis on Picasso. So like personally what I want to see, right, is like we set up a Pika pool on Osmosis with Pika and the Osmo emissions, and the same thing Osmosis token on our DEX with Osmo and Pika emissions as well. This would be like very nice to show the collaboration like effort. Yeah.
And what wallets are actually going to be compatible on Pablo?
Polkadot JS, Talisman, and Nova wallet.
Okay. I've used Polkadot JS. It wasn't the best user experience, to be honest, but it's also been a while ago. I think Talisman and Nova, which a lot of people have recommended me, but I haven't used it yet, are pretty much more intuitive, at least, than Polkadot JS. But let's see. Rosan is saying, I think when we talked about multi-chain margin, looks like Kuji is going to help here about the multi-chain margin part. Are you like in talks with these with them, or?
Yeah, this is definitely something we've been discussing with them.
Okay, nice. Let's see what else we have. I think we're good. Yeah, but there were a lot of good questions here, a lot of good conversations in the chat. Now, before I let you go, drop us some alpha. I mean, I remember last time we did this interview, already dropped that there might be an airdrop for early Pablo users or early Centauri users. So has this now been refined? Is there going to be any airdrop? And what other alpha can you share?
Yeah, so we're gonna like in due time we'll put out the qualifications, but yes, there will be an airdrop for the Pablo token for sure, both for users of Pablo and for people who are like bridging. So basically bridging over to between Cosmos and Sama. So that's like for sure the baseline. Other things will be like similar sort of like mission-based airdrops, just like Osmosis had back in the day. You know, like do XYZ things, and if you hit X amount of targets, you get an airdrop. So this is also going to be something we definitely pursue. But we are trying to align this with the launch of launching Pablo will happen the same time, the Pablo token, the same time as the bridge, because we do want people to actually use the bridge. And this is kind of like our way to subsidize people coming over.
Are you also targeting communities, like for example, stakers of Osmo Atom, something like that? And how much of has this already been defined, like how much of the Genesis supply will be airdropped?
That's not been defined yet, but definitely Osmo Atom stakers. There's going to be other projects as well. Like you could see the list when we put it out on Friday. We'll probably have a small handful of those guys. Those token stakers will probably get an airdrop as well. But it's all subject to future communications.
Sounds good, yeah. But I mean, you said mid-December, right? Now it's already first week of December, so not too long, too far out. But yeah, I really appreciate the time. And again, you're gonna see more Composable content here on YouTube, also on Twitter at Cryptocito. Follow the Brain Jar, Composable Finance, and Picasso Network on Twitter. And I'll see you guys soon. And thanks, Brain Jar, and I'll see you as well at some point in the future.
Thank you.
Cheers.